Okay. All right. Okay.
Good morning and welcome to the third week of the Citi Business Festival. My name is Jifa Ekwia Ametam. I'll be your moderator today. This week we are looking at how we feed ourselves through a sound import substitution agenda. As it stands now, Ghana imports over $2 billion worth of food into the country, and that's something that we can produce locally. If we are able to at least keep 1 billion of that in the country, we'll have businesses that will grow and employ more young people. We'll go for a break and then I'll introduce our guest.
Apsa, we believe in helping people find a way to get things done. We call this Africanacity.
Welcome back. It is the Citi Business Festival. We want to hear from you. So wherever you're watching us from, please use the hashtag Citi Business Festival for us to hear your thoughts. And the WhatsApp line is 0550-585832. As I mentioned before the break, we bring in billions of dollars worth of foodstuff into the country that we have the potential to actually produce locally. And today we'll be looking at how we achieve a sound import substitution strategy. I have with me Madam Catherine Koboduse, who's an agribusiness entrepreneur and the CEO of Eden Tree. Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome.
I also have with me Mr. William Neti. He's the head of agribusiness at Apsa Bank, Ghana. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us.
I'm happy to be here.
And I have with me Mr. Kwesi Kobo, who is an agric economist and MD of Gersau. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
And on Zoom, we have two guests. The 2018 National Best Farmer, Mr. James Boateng, is joining us via Zoom. If he's there, he'll just wave at us. Good morning, Mr. Boateng. And we also have with us Benjamin Jan Kesse, who's the director of the Cosmos Innovation Center. He will also be joining us via Zoom. The way the conversation will work is that we will look at the policy angle first. Have we put in place enough policies to ensure that farmers on the ground are competitive? Beyond just farmers, when it comes to processing, what kind of policies do we have as a nation to ensure that the people in the processing space are also competitive? Because when you talk about import substitution, we're looking at the store shelves, we're looking at what consumers are buying. And if we are bringing in billions of dollars into the country, then clearly there's a demand. So how do we position our local businesses in a way that they'll be able to take full advantage of that demand? And I'm hearing that my two Zoom guests have joined us. So good morning, Ben. Thank you so much for being with us. And good morning, Mr. Boateng. Thank you for being with us. So I'll start with you, Catherine. When we talk about our policy and production challenges in this country, how far do you think we've come as far as the policies that we have? How realistic are they to actually helping us achieve our developmental drive?
Okay, as a private sector person, I'd say that I hear a lot about investing into the agriculture space, but however, I think we still have a very long way to go. Okay. And like you said, imports come in because it's cheaper. So if we are going to compete with imports, it means that we really need to invest in agriculture, smallholder farmers, commercial farms. If we're going to compete with imports, we must have commercial farms producing.
Now, tell us a bit about Eating Tree and the work that you've been doing over the decades to actually ensure Ghanaians have access to, local fruits and veggies.
Eating Tree has been operating for the past 24 years now, and we're into the fruit and vegetable space. We've been doing this all this time. Customers, consumers require nutritional food, balanced diets, and with that, you need to provide safe, healthy fruit and veg. And that's the space that we've occupied. It's been difficult, it's been very hard, but we are doing it and we'll continue to do it.
Okay. Mr. James Spartan, I'm coming to you now. When you look at Ghana's agri policy, how far have we gone as far as using those policies to actually achieve our developmental drive?
I'd like to go a bit backwards to look at, because prior to this session, I think the question was whether the policy is clear. If you look at the entire policy, it's been so well articulated. It is very concise. It is based on sound objectives. It's based on data. In fact, some of the data is even provided by the multilateral organizations. So it's a very sound document. It spells out all the projects, all the angles of agriculture, who is responsible for what. The various flagship projects are all outlined in the policy. If you like, planting for jobs, food and jobs, planting for food and jobs, planting for exports, which is the PED, rearing for exports, the greenhouse villages. Very, 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 very well documented piece of document. The problem I have really is to do with the implementation. In fact, as I started reading through the document, I thought that we all knew everything, especially policymakers. It's very well documented. So the question is, how come that we are still dogged so much by our local agricultural front? And I think these are some of the questions that we'll be addressing. So in terms of the availability of the policy, it is there. So well clarified. Fantastic documents. But I can still find huge gaps here and there in terms of its implementation, and especially the monitoring and evaluation and the consequences and the redirection if we don't achieve these targets.
Very much. Now, Mr. Kwesi Kobo, I want to ask you from the agri-economics perspective, are we able to achieve our developmental drive, and what would we need to do both on the farm to the supermarket shelves to ensure that we are competitive enough to beat down some of these imports?
Yeah, so maybe let me start with perspective. Let me confess, I've been involved in policy at the ministry for 4 or 5 years as an advisor. So, like James said, we've had policies over the years. Now, why do you fashion out policies? You fashion out policies because you're trying to address some inherent defects in something. So the first question is to identify what is it that is a defect, or what are you trying to intervene or ameliorate within a certain agricultural ecosystem. We've had FASDEP 1, FASDEP 2, various policies over the years since our independence. The problem is this, and I like to look at also the value chain from a more holistic view in terms of what we call field to fork. The problem is that we've had, whether democracies, whether military governments, we had various policy initiatives and drives that probably sometimes create a bit of incoherence. So one starts and then there's a change in government, there's a change in the party, and then everything started all over again. So there's no clear cut as a country. And I think as a country, we all got to agree that what is it we want to do? We want to reduce imports. Now, which of the value chains do we have the best possible chance to reduce imports? Because we're in a free trade, global free trade. You cannot be imposing tariffs. I mean, we are security WTO. So the keys are, we got to first identify them, okay? And once you identify those value chains, how do we get those milestones that we want to achieve? It means that there should be a dialogue between the public sector or the ministry and other related agencies and also the private sector. We're also got to be mindful that some value chains are more mature than others. So with some of these value chains, for example, you've got the private sector already in the forefront, where they made serious innovations and serious developments within those value chains. So we've got to recognize that. So it's a complex thing, and I think that it comes back to getting everybody around the table. It comes back to prioritizing which of the value chains we're looking at, because you cannot reduce imports for all the value chains overnight. I mean, we export as a country. What do? We export those things that we're also competitive. Yeah. So it's not, for some imports, you have no choice but to still import them. Because maybe ecologically, you may not be able to be competitive. But we also know that there's some that we can, take the poultry industry, we can be competitive. Today, the rice industry, we can be competitive. The sugar, we can be. You talk about the edible oils, for example, the palm oil sector, we can be. So the question is that how do we address it? And I think that maybe the time has come for all of us engaged in the agricultural sector, be it those in production, those in finance, those in processing, markets, the whole chain, the development, all of us agree that, look, this is the way forward for us. Let's target 2 or 3 value chains, and let's see how we can then invest it. And investment is not only necessarily government. Investment is both government and also the private sector. And also, how do we strengthen the regulatory environment? I mean, today, probably, I'm sure Catherine will bear out with me, land usage, for example. You drive, years ago, you drive from here to my hometown, Somenya, you see a lot of mango farms. Today, buildings are encroaching. Yeah. These are some issues that we need to look at. So it's not just about production-related issues, it's about also the environment, the regulations, how do we enforce them? How do we ensure that the right policies are in place there? Those are the critical things that we need to look at. And for me, that would be my initial take.
Okay.
On this.
We'll come back, especially on the rice and the tomato space, because there are entrepreneurs doing that, and they're still struggling to really beat down the number of products we import. But Mr. Nete, let me come to you now. Apsa, and I deliberately left Apsa for last, as well as KIC, because Apsa is our sponsor, okay? So we know that you're busy and you're always on the go, but if you need to shop anything online or move money from one place to the other, there are Apsa digital channels that are available for you to do that. You just simply go onto their website, www.apsa.com.gh, find out about their digital channels, and then subscribe to those services. That's Africanacity, that's Apsa. And then it's also supported by IT Consortium. Now, what IT Consortium does is that if you're an agribusiness and you're in the online space and you need to figure out really how to take money from your suppliers and your customers, they will take care of that entire back end for you. So we have a lot of entrepreneurs tuning in. We're going to talk to Ben about how people are using technology to scale the solutions they're providing in the agri space. So you definitely want to check out IT Consortium. But back to you and what the banks are doing to help us really solve this import dependence problem as far as equipping the local entrepreneurs with the resources they need.
Right, so thank you. I think that the financial institutions are doing a lot currently. If you look at statistics over the past few years, coming to somewhere 2019, investment into agriculture is increasing. I'm sure the entrepreneurs would query that, but that is what the statistics say. And it's because banks are beginning to realize that agribusiness is also a very important, or is key to our economy. When you look at last year, for instance, within COVID and the GDP going, so low, agriculture stood out. The growth was about 5% or more, and that shows that the sector is resilient and it can move forward. What we are doing as financial institutions to help is to identify these businesses which are in, let me put it, a good position, because for us, it's people's deposits that we have, and that is what we are giving out as loans or investments into these businesses. And so we need to be sure that these businesses that we are putting investors' money into are worth it, and that they are prepared to utilize it and pay back. And so those are the things that we are looking out for in the agribusinesses that we are supporting. People may say that, well, I am at a place, at a portion, I'm not getting some of the financing. What is it? What we are putting across is that we need to prepare our agribusinesses, so building their capacity. Who is going to do that? All of us, like Mr. Kobo said, all of us have to come together. We as private sector, we as government, we as players in the industry, we need to build our capacity. When we build our capacity and we're in a good position, your books are all right, you have a model, a business model that speaks to what you are doing. You can explain everything that you are doing. You have built capacity even in the area of having a fallback. Then when you come to a financial institution, we will be able to help. At Apsa, we are seeking to bring people's possibility to life, and that is why we think that we should prepare a strong agri-entrepreneurs, and then we'll be able to lend to them.
Thank you very much. Now, we have Ben with us as well. He's a farmer. He's been in the space for a while, and he's been working with entrepreneurs in the agri space for years. Ben, on the one hand, we are bringing in over $400 million worth of rice into the country. We're bringing in almost $90 million worth of tomatoes in the country. When you talk about chocolate, we're bringing in over $10 million worth of chocolate. On the other hand, we have policies like Planting for Food and Jobs, which are supposed to help us be competitive on the farm. We have policies like One District, One Factory that's supposed to help us really process these things, not only the finished products, but even the input. What exactly do we need to do to ensure that our policies align to our developmental needs, from your experience being a farmer and also working with agri-entrepreneurs?
Thank you very much, Joshua. And my take here is how well have we communicated these policies? It needs to get down to the community. I work with the entrepreneurs, just like you said, and sometimes for a lot of the entrepreneurs, but for our program, they will not even understand, or they will not even know some of the policies. So just imagine the other guy on the street who is hustling on his own and trying to do something in this space. And also, how is the policy and the policy holders implemented engaging the real actors out there? So Catherine is there. We've worked with Catherine because she's been on our panel. We've used her facility as market research facility. She's engaged young entrepreneurs, explained some of these things to them, the processes she goes through, how she deals with policy. But for the other guy, what would they do if there's not a program like KIC that they can interact with? So I think for us, getting closer to the communities, getting closer to the farmers, getting closer to the aggregators, to the processors, that is one sure way of also making sure that we are all aligned on the policy. I think my friend Citi Kobo was saying something. How do we bring all the value chain actors? And when I say value chain actors, I'm talking about the Apsas, the policymakers, the inputs dealers, everybody. What do we focus on? How deliberate we get, and setting timelines, milestones. That for me is what we can do to make sure that we will be able to actualize whatever we have set for ourselves as a policy, and how that can also lead into our development needs. So we need to come together and make sure this is done and translated to the last mile. And when I say to the last mile, the guy who is out there doing the production, to the middle guy who is aggregating, to the transporter. And then I heard Francis on your program this one talking about the value chain. It's long, it's huge. are all these people aligned with the policy? And I think for me, that is a bigger question that we need to answer. And once we're able to answer the question, we would have made a lot of progress.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. Kwesi, I have to come back to you, because when you talk to the entrepreneurs on the ground, they tell you things like, if I'm in cashew production, for instance, I spend most of my time making sure I get all the stones out of the cashew before I manufacture. If I'm in rice production, I have to spend so much time aggregating the rice suppliers. But then you sit back and you're like, but we have policies that are supposed to make these processes a bit seamless for you so that you're competitive. What's the missing link between the policies we have out there and what's happening on the ground, and how do we close those gaps?
Okay, so let's take rice. You mentioned rice. Let's take rice, okay. Now, there are various aspects to the rice value chain. Production, processing, markets.
Yeah.
Okay. As we sit here today, I can say that Ghana as a country is competitive in rice production, all right? But you're right that there's a bit of disconnect. Now, we've got to be very clear, what are we expecting of public sector investments and what are we expecting of private sector investments? I operate in the rice sector, and we're seeing a lot of rice mills coming up all over the country, which is an indication that the private sector is willing to come up. The critical issues are, how do you get paddy rice going through at a certain quality? So there are a lot of issues that have to be addressed, okay? So if we want to address the rice problem holistically, of course, government under the PFJ currently is giving out rice seeds and fertilizer and so forth. But can it be done in such a way that the rice mills are then really connected to them and ensure that those mills are working within what you call it, you set in special zones whereby these things feed into it. Okay. Unfortunately, in this country, we do most of our production under rain-fed. So there are some technical issues about rice, for example, where if you harvest and your moisture content is low and you mill, you're unable to get the rice that you can compete with those coming from Vietnam and Thailand. So there's a need also to fill that space of having silos. Now the question is that who owns those silos? Who invests in those silos? So throughout the year, even though we're not doing all year round production because of the lack of irrigation facility, millers can have access to rice at the right moisture content. So it comes back to the point I made. You've clearly identified where the missing link is. Now how do you address it? And that means that there are two key participants in this whole thing. The public, the Ministry of Agric, and other related agencies, and then the private sector. And then also even the banks and other related services providing finance for. A few models have been tried, and I've been involved in those models where a few rice millers have been selected, been funded, they've been linked to some of these growers who will link to them. We're trying out testing these systems. And if they tend to be successful, then it's very easy to expand. But at the end of the day, what comes out clearly is a dialogue and everybody knowing what his or her responsibility is. The problem is that you have a situation where the public sector drives you too much, and sometimes, they leaves the passenger who is a private person who's supposed to be the one who's driving that process behind. And sometimes the case where they all talk over each other. And I think that it's important that some of these things that we're trying, we see what the end results are and how we can make it work. The problem is that, yes, we want to eliminate, we want to reduce to a minimal rice exportation. You can't do it overnight because, for example, how strong is our seed system? Is there enough rice to give to farmers to grow? Because we know, there are various figures. Some people say we import 700,000 metric tons of rice, some say 800,000, depending on whose figures you want to use. Okay. But clearly we know what it is. We know our consumption of rice is going up. Okay. So I think that these things we're trying to do, and some that we're doing with some of the financial institutions, will help address it. But ultimately, and I keep on saying ultimately, unless the private sector itself also stands up and be heard, and then make themselves heard and tell those in policy that this is the way for it, because at the end we are the ones investing in the business, then we have a situation where expectations are not met. And as such, we're able to accelerate and reduce in a relatively short time the importation of rice coming to the country. So something is going on, but is it enough? No. Could it be better? Yes. How do we do it? Let's dialogue and let's be clear where we all stand. That's how I see we addressing this lacuna between our ability to produce and process and then reduce to a minimum what we're importing in the country.
Okay, Catherine, I have to come to you on this because, I mean, we see your products on the supermarket shelves. Let's take something as simple as tomatoes, for instance. Why have we not been able to produce tomatoes locally? And we still have millions of dollars of tomatoes that we bring into the country.
Okay, it's investment and the smallholder farmers. You know, we have the natural resources, but how do we connect them? We have land, we have water, we have sun. How do we connect them? We are facing climate change. Farmers who don't have irrigation have to wait for rain. It is not raining, okay? So that's why we don't feel the policies. Is there a way to plan and engineer that we trap the rainwater? If it rains, we trap it. We have dams, we make dams, dugouts, boreholes for the smallholder farmers, okay? We need solar pumps so that we can harness the sun. Fuel is expensive, okay? So if a farmer can't afford fuel, it means that he has to wait for rain. But if we want that farmer to farm all year round, assist with a solar pump. Solar pumps are very expensive. It's the initial cost. 1 2-horsepower solar pump is 36,000. A smallholder farmer will not be able to afford that. So how can we get all these things connected so that it works? So that when it works, then we don't have to import tomatoes from Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso, they trap rainwater, they have dams, they have connected. But in Ghana, we still need to go further to connect our natural resources. Otherwise, there's a disconnect. And that's why we are always, if we don't connect these natural resources, we are always going to rely on imports. If you want 5,000 kilograms of carrots, it means that you have to go to different farms to collect the 5,000 kilograms of carrots. If you import a container of carrots, you end up having 24,000 kilograms of carrots in a container. That's volumes, that's scale. So until we get to scale, I don't know. I don't know if there will be a change. We really need to connect our natural resources for the farmers to be able to use them. I have a group in Adan. They are our growers. There's Ghana Irrigation Authority that has done a beautiful reservoir. All we need to do is pump the water from the Volta into the reservoir. But they're using ECG. They can't pay. So what then happens is that ECG disconnects, and then the reservoir is there. The water is there. How do you connect? They can't afford ECG. Solar power pumps. Pump the water from the lake into the reservoir. You've connected the resources for them to use. Without that, it's sitting there. They're not working.
So beyond just the policies, what you're saying is we really need to identify the needs of the people on the ground.
Exactly.
And how to make it a bit more
how to make it work. Not wait for rain 3 months in a year, twice in a year. We can't do that.
And we can't.
Not with food. We are eating every day.
Okay, so we're going to go for a quick break. We're talking about import substitution. How do we feed ourselves through sound import substitution? We want to hear from you, so please use the hashtag Citi Business Festival for us to hear from you. Our Zoom guest, we want you to wave at us because in a few minutes we'll be asking you some of the questions for our guest this morning. And then once we come from the break, we'll be looking at food processing, because a big part of it is how do we process these meals. Ghanaians have grown a taste for processed foods, and unfortunately the outside market has found a way to fill that gap. So how do we create that locally? So we're going from the policies that will help us really meet our developmental needs, and then what do we do in the processing space? Obviously this has been sponsored by Apsa Bank. If you need to move money from one place to the other, if you need to buy that nice dress and shoes you've been eyeing for a long time, we know that you're busy, you're always on the go. So just take your phone and click on the Apsa channels and you'll be able to make payments and you'll be able to move money from one place to the other. That's Africanacity, that's Apsa. And you can go to their website, www.apsa.com.gh, for more information. And of course, it's also supported by IT Consortium. IT Consortium is a fintech that deals with everything that you have to do with payments on the back end of your services. So you don't want to miss out on what they have to offer if you're an agribusiness. Don't go anywhere, we'll be right back.
And this is how it connects us.
私たちをつなぐ
At Apsa, we believe in helping people find a way to get things done. We call this Africanacity.
Good Day Energy Drink keeps you going. Available in major supermarkets and shops near you. Excessive drinking can be detrimental to your health. Not recommended for persons under 18 years, lactating mothers, pregnant women, and people sensitive to caffeine. This advert is FDA approved.
Welcome back. It's still the Citi Business Festival. We are talking about agribusiness this week, and today we're focusing more on how we feed ourselves through a sound import substitution agenda. As it stands, Ghana imports over $2 billion worth of food into the country, and that's something that we can bring down. We can bring the number down if we find products that we can produce locally to substitute those imports that we have into the country. If you have any questions or contributions to the conversation, we want to hear from you. So please use the hashtag Citi Business Festival for us to hear from you. Our WhatsApp line is 0550-585832. If you're on Twitter, tweet at me at GFACityTV. I'd love to read your messages. And if you're on Zoom, just click on that button that looks like this, and we will have you ask your questions on video for us. We've gone from policy. We're now going to segue a bit into processing, because when we talk about the sophisticated taste we have, most of us are looking at processed goods and how far are we as far as the market to meet this demand. I want to mention a quick quote I saw on the USDA website encouraging American farmers to actually look at Ghana as an import destination where they export their products to. So they said, even though demand for processed foods continue to grow in Ghana, inefficient production, high energy costs, and poor quality of local raw materials preclude the development of a viable processing industry. So they've even acknowledged that because of all these issues, the demand is there, but it's difficult for local businesses to actually meet that demand because, one, we have inefficient production, two, we have high energy cost, and three, we have poor quality of local raw materials. So James, I'm coming to you with this question. How do we solve the issues with our processing space, and how do we ensure that we create value enough to meet the demand that the Ghanaian consumer has for processed goods currently?
Okay. I think for any processor, there are certain things that are key. You mentioned, quality of raw materials. I think you've also mentioned energy requirements. At the end of the day, it's not even the quality alone. The source of the raw materials is very important, and the reliability of the raw materials. And then you're talking about, your utilities, what the processors call utilities. So it is your electricity, it's your water, and all the other things. And at the end of the day, you have to be able to sell what you process. If we begin to track all the way, and if we start from sourcing, which are the first point of the value chain, I mean, everything we do inefficiently in the agricultural production space affects the quality of the raw materials that we send to the processors. If you look at it, it's a myriad of issues that confront producers. I'm in the production phase. In my previous world, I used to handle processing plants of big multinationals. But now I'm a producer of agricultural produce. And I realized that everything from what you've mentioned and the other panelists have mentioned, to do with land, to do with even climate change. I mean, Catherine talks about irrigation. It's so critical. We cannot continue to rely on rainfall. In terms of, Kwesi spoke about moisture levels, which affect what the processor does. So all of these things, issues of financing, funding, I'm aware as a farmer, just because of the fact that I'm a commercial farmer, I'm aware of what Kwesi and a number of people are doing. His team, GESAL funding, I know we may come to that. But the average farmer today, averagely is unable to access funding. So there are funding issues. Besides the funding issues, some of the farmers don't even have access to information as to where the markets are. They do not even know. I mean, until I started taking up seriously mango production, fruits on my farm were wasting. When Blue Skies and HPW were importing mangoes and fruits from neighboring Burkina Faso, an arid country, they bring in fruits from Senegal. Those countries have things that we can copy with pride, So it's a myriad of things that really affects the raw materials. Now, let me just move into the inputs. I think it's about time that we have some special vehicles for processors. If you have ever been in processing and you look at the cost of your utilities, I mean, we do not have special rates for processors in many countries because industrialization and manufacturing drives all the benefits within a country, jobs, economic well-being, improvement in livelihoods, even creating markets for the people in primary supply chain like farmers. Government has special vehicles for utilities such as water and electricity. I don't know whether we have that now. I've left processing for some time, but it was a major bottleneck, major constraint. So if I leave that and I move to the other end of it, sometimes when I see factories springing up and processing and all of that, I wonder whether we have even evaluated whether the size of the demand. Someone like Catherine has been in the business of fruits and vegetables for years. I believe she knows her market thoroughly. She knows where to sell. We take it for granted, but it's not every processor who has a clear idea as to where they're going to sell. In fact, I was quite surprised, and I don't want to disclose, but there is a mango processor who has come up, built a factory, and they've now started thinking of, okay, after we process, where's the concentrate market? They even have issues with raising enough capital to be able to buy mangoes. So all of this that I've spoken about and a lot more, which I believe that the other panelists can add to, have impact on processing. And if you put all of it together, it's not surprising that we are where we are, where we see demand for processed goods, and all we do is to bring it in, and we blame ourselves that we have a taste for imports. People must consume what they perceive to be quality. They will consume what they perceive to have the right taste. But it is some of these issues which have dogged the processing sector of our economy, or the processing sector of Ghana, which also tends to impact on all the other interlinked sectors.
Thank you. Ben, I know you're drinking your water right now, but I'm coming to you because you're working with entrepreneurs to solve some of these issues that we are facing as far as the processing space is concerned. So what is the status now as a nation? You know, what are some of the gains that we can boast of that when it comes to processing? These are the spaces that we've been able to improve on. And what's the way forward? What are the opportunities that you've seen that aspiring entrepreneurs listening and watching us this morning can also take up?
Right. I'll tell you a few from what we've done here at Cosmos Innovation Center, but I just want to touch on a few things. At one point where Catherine talked about irrigation, and then I'll segue into this because I think there's a great link. So policy on youth. What is the policy? And KIC is doing supporting young entrepreneurs to come up with innovative solutions. We don't even get that much engagement from policymakers. We make strides. Koboy has been very gracious, and he gives us audience when he was with the Ministry of Food and Agriculture. He gives us direction, some technical support every now and then when we go to him. But how much of that do we get? And especially when the entrepreneurs are out, they have great products. They are approaching the ministry, they are not getting all the kind of support. And we also have limited funding as to how much we can really support the entrepreneurs. So that's because when you talked about irrigation, we have one company, Farm Class, that is providing low-cost solar-powered irrigation. We are looking for clients for them. We're looking for the ministry to put them through their program so that farmers can have access to it. We've tested it from here. It works. How are we supporting such young entrepreneurs? These are very important things. So segueing into the processing, there are some good ideas that we've seen. We currently have seen some young entrepreneurs, even from our fold, turning fruits into baby food. We have some of them turning cashew into industrial ethanol. We have some of them working around coconut and then turning them into various snacks that you can take, anytime, any day. Generally, you also see a lot of young people also getting in the space of where Catherine is. They are shopping for people, and then they are doing some pre-processing for people. There are also areas where we have companies and startups and SMEs in the meat processing era. We have the like of some of the companies that have been on our business booster. We have Geese, who is up north also processing guinea fowls and et cetera, et cetera. So there are a few of them coming up. But if you look at what is coming up, we are quite kind of limited. You see the vegetables pre-processing, you see a few around the meat processing, and then you see a few around food processing. But we don't have majority of them going into where we can say that we are processing the quantity and quality of, for instance, some of the fruit juices that are imported into the country. We cannot say that we are processing to the quality and the quantity of some of the meat products that come into our country. Everything else, and then the taste we have acquired, most of our companies are not able to attain. So what is missing for me is that the skills development is missing. The infrastructure and the support to help, and then the risk that we have the CSIR and these various affiliates or various verticals, the food research, etc., that can support all of these things. How many people are able to work to them? During the COVID, for instance, I think FDA was trying to support the SMEs to get certification and process more. That's a good one, but question is, where is the skills training for us to be able to match up the taste? So as much as we are doing more in this space, or we have some inroads, I think that we need to focus also more on the skills development and the financing and the technology, the appropriate technology that will help us be able to meet the quality, the taste, and also the quantity. Because most of the guys who are doing the good stuff are not able to scale because they do not have all that they need to be able to move to the next level. And I'll talk about even my personal experience in the past, in the 1996, 1997, when my family started fruit processing. We're looking for funding, you're not getting funding. So you have to rely on that one person who will have to use his salary to make the farm, to get the fruits, to process, to sell. It's a lot of money that goes in there. How long can one person do that? So financing, technology, skills development, and then also the infrastructure to support is something that we can do so that we can support those who are already there and also encourage others who would want to come into this stage.
Thank you very much, Ben. And great way, because you can't talk about processing without looking at financing. So, William and Chrissy, I would have to ask you finance-related questions, because a lot of people are wondering, where is the money? If you're taking the raw materials, you need machines, large volumes of machines to actually turn it into processed goods. You need machines to package it well, talk about distribution. What are some of the supports you have for entrepreneurs in the processing space?
All right, so I would put it rather value addition and not just processing, because that keeps it broader. We look at the value chain itself, the whole agri-value chain, looking at it from the production end to the processing or to the consuming point. And the processing is in between, and so we have to be sure that those who are processing themselves are getting the needed raw materials to feed their factories. Do we have enough production? So that's how we look at it. Is there financing going to those areas? And so because it has been said that some of our farmers, the smallholder farmers, are not well organized, it becomes so difficult to reach them. How do we reach out to them? From our point of view, we work with actors like Eden Tree and all other processors who are in touch with these smallholder farmers, provide some support to them so they can come up with what these farmers need. We work with them to be able to supply this equipment for them. So we're using these agribusinesses that are higher on the chain to be able to reach out to these farmers. In terms of processing, we know that they need all the various equipment. So we have an equipment or asset financing department where they look at how do we support these businesses. So if they are buying equipment to process feed, how do we put in place a very innovative way of supporting them? Once they get the equipment, they have to put it in an area. They have to put it, construct something. How do we pull all these things together to make sure that they have the right infrastructure to be able to produce? Beyond that, we also expect that the big multinational, and we've done that has been done within certain industries, that the big multinationals should be encouraged to link up with financial institutions so that we'll be able to reach more outgrowers. We've talked about commercial farming, which is great for us. Once it's commercial, it makes a lot of sense. You are able to assess what is being done. You can then make a judgment and then go into finance. But for those on the lower side, how do we reach out? And we think that one of the ways to reach out to them is that we get the multinationals or the bigger companies involved, link them up to financial institutions where we would be able to reach out to this one. In terms of youth, that was mentioned, we at Apsa are working closely with some of these fintechs to be able to develop their products, and most of them are really young, so you need to nurture them. How do we nurture them? We provide them with training, we provide them with startup products to be able to develop to a point where investments can be made. So there's a lot of ways, and we have we've been working with partners. One of our great partners is GESAL, but we also work with the Rural Development Fund. We work with the MasterCard Foundation to be able to come up with innovative ways of reaching out to these youth and even women at their level. If we don't do that, we are likely to miss the plot.
Thank you. I'll come to Kwesi on really how to ensure that the entrepreneurs who are processing are competitive, because the feedback I get from some is that the people who actually import raw materials into the country and package it end up being more competitive than those who source locally. So how do we ensure that we are giving them enough financing to be competitive if they decide to source the materials here and process it here and then package it? And Catherine, there was a Confident report earlier this year that 26% of the products on our supermarket shelves are actually locally sourced, made in Ghana goods. That's up from, I think, 2019, that number was about 19%. But how do we flip that? Because you're one of the few entrepreneurs who have succeeded in capturing that space. How do we flip it to a point where local producers are actually dominating 72-74% of the store shelves, and then the imported products are taking about 22%. But we do have our Zoom guests on the line. We're going to engage them, and then if they have any questions, just raise your hand, and then I'll throw it to you, and then you ask our panel directly. And if you're watching us, we want to hear from you as well. So please use the hashtag Citi Business Festival for us to hear your thoughts. And our WhatsApp line is 0550-585832. If you're outside Ghana, you can use the country code +233. And if you're on Twitter, you can tweet at me at GFacity TV, and I'll ask them all of your questions. Let me see if we have some hands up so that I can just throw it at our Zoom guest. And whilst we wait, I think, Camila Rice. He's actually one of the young entrepreneurs in the agric space, producing rice, obviously. Camille, good morning. I'm sorry, we're trying to hear you. We're on mute, so please try and unmute yourself so we can hear you, Camille. We'll try and get back to you because we are not able to hear your sound now, but I'm sure it has to do with the rice sector. Perfect, I think we hear you. Camille, good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm receiving.
Awesome. Please, what's your question?
I think I have a bit of challenges. I just heard Ben speak, and I was so happy to hear him. I was part of the Cosmos guys, and he just spoke, I think, what has been worrying me. Look, as a country, we undermine so much of the young guys who are into the agriculture sector. We, the young guys, don't need much to expand or to push whatever we are doing. My senior director, I think with the rice industry, I'll plead with him. They shouldn't make things strict for the young entrepreneurs who have the ideas. Maybe they might not have the resources, they might not have the collaterals to come for a loan from ADB. They should make things easy for us to be able to access funding. And believe me, we have a lot of ideas to be able to push the agriculture sector in Ghana to wherever we want it. But if they don't make things relaxed for us to be able to tap into the resources, it's always going to be difficult for all of us. Yes, you have entrepreneurs, but we will not go anywhere. I think this is my little concern.
Okay, thank you, Camille. So I hope our guest heard him. He's a young entrepreneur producing rice, and just like the question I asked you, some of the challenges they have is that the people who are actually bringing in the rice into the country and packaging them end up being able to sell those rice at a lower price, because if you're producing locally, you have to go source the rice, you have to filter it, you have to do all those things, package it. At the end, the customer is just going to make the decisions based on price points, because we're a developing country. How do we help these entrepreneurs as far as financing is concerned?
Okay, so just a bit on processing. I mean, I like the term William used.
Value addition.
Because in most people's mind, processing involves some humongous machine, not necessarily.
Just add value.
Okay. So just adding value. Value could be just the husking coconut. for your parties.
Or taking the stones out of some groundnuts.
Groundnuts. I mean, that is value addition. Okay. Now, take rice, for example. I mean, you'd be surprised also to find out, actually, if you go to supermarkets, and I've checked, and when I got the invitation, I went to check. Some foreign rice are going for almost about 11, 12 cedis per kilo.
Yeah.
I eat locally produced rice, grade A rice, 5% broken, and I'm buying mine for 6, 7 Ghana cedis per kilo. So actually, it is not true. The challenge, and William mentioned, I think James also mentioned, the challenge is that for each product you want to put on the market, there are certain critical specifications you require of the raw material, and that's where the challenge is. The challenge is that how do you get production to a certain level that allows for you to do that value addition? And that's where the problem is. Again, example. So we bring a lot of rice from Thailand, Vietnam, 5% broken. Now to get that, you can bring the most sophisticated equipment you have. If a moisture content is below 9 degrees, you're not going to get a grade A rice. So it's not about the equipment, it's about the raw material. Okay. You talk about tomato. I mean, I can give you so many products. Okay.
We can even use tomato paste as an example. We bring $25 million
and we are actually financing
tomato paste
a company
that
are doing tomato now. But then also in a funny way, sometimes we've got to be very careful because in a funny way, in a Western country, fresh tomato is deemed to be
premium.
Yeah. Here we consume it, and during the rainy season we consume it, and then we mix it up with paste and all kinds of things. But let me come back to the key issue. So the fundamental issue of financing means that where do you get a raw material base? And that's where the problem is. The problem in processing is predicated on issues of production. It's not just about, it's about two things. The volume to get a critical mass and the quality specifications. Because for the same product, if I'm doing rice, I want to do piebald rice, whether it's 6, the moisture content is 6, I really don't care because I want to do pieballing and I can still mill it and to be straight, but then it will have a bit of discoloration. If I want to do grade BC rice and the moisture content is 6, I have no problem. But if I want to do grade 1 rice, the moisture content has to be above 10 or 12. So those are, and earlier on I mentioned that sort of missing links between having salad because of our production systems. Because we don't produce all year round rice. In the north, it's just one season. In the water areas, it's done progressively from district to district based on rainfall pattern and other things. So you're talking about 5-6 months. What happens the other 6 months when there's no paddy rice? Or those that we bought, it's deteriorated so badly that you're not able to get that grade right. And that's where the fundamental problem is. So that's why I keep on saying that we need to go back to production. So you talk about irrigation, for example. What's the policy on irrigation? If you look at the history of irrigation policy during the Nkrumah era, sorry, I'm going back to
no, you have
Nkrumah
to.
Era.
It started with
a social issue. Let's look at irrigation as a social good, a public good. Okay, I've been involved in some irrigation schemes where we funded it through donor funding, through MCC and so forth. Give it 5 years, it runs down. The question, should we now look at improving irrigation schemes in farmers who have irrigation systems in their farms? Should we look at it now and move away from public-owned schemes? Because we know that governments put in money every time, and then come 5 years, it's a rate. So those are the fundamental questions I was alluding to earlier on that. Unless there's a clear dialogue and we change the policy narrative, these problems will still be there. And of course, we give guarantees to the banks. Okay. Now, we're trying to encourage agricultural lending. We're trying to encourage the banks and William and Co, though they are also good agriculturists, to look at agriculture from a holistic point of view. But then, why are banks not lending? They're not lending because take agricultural lending, it's about 4 or 5% of portfolio. Even for some banks, it's even lower. But what's agricultural contribution to GDP? 19.2%. There's a mismatch. Clearly, it contributes 5 times what is in the portfolio. And I'm talking about other value which falls under manufacturing or services. Okay. So the banks then will hold back because, like William said, they are beholden to their shareholders. They will have a return on their capital. They are beholden to also to comply with Bank of Ghana rules. Okay. So what we're trying to do is, okay, look, can we work with you to now do more rigorous and robust analysis so that we can then do 2 things. We can increasingly increase the amount of funding, and by supporting you with guarantees and giving you technical assistance, and also by training you to assess projects properly, and then also reduce the NPLs. So it whets your appetite to learn more to the sector. So that's what we're doing now.
Okay, I'll let you finish, but we have to go for a quick break. And then I want Catherine to also talk, because I see a lot of entrepreneurs in our Zoom audience, and I know that getting that customer's eyeball is a challenge that a lot of them are facing. Even when you've done all your due diligence, it's still difficult to get customers to pick up that finished product you have on the supermarket shelf. So we'll be taking a look at that. But this is still the Citi Business Festival. This week is all about agribusiness. If there's one thing we learned from the coronavirus pandemic, is that if we close our borders and the world closes borders to us, we'll be able to feed ourselves. While the industry sector suffered, the service sector suffered, agri sector actually did quite well. How do we now approach that sector in an intentional manner, in a way that we can say that, okay, if we're bringing in billions of dollars worth of food in a year, how do we cut down on certain things? How do we cut down on rice imports? How do we cut down on tomato imports? How do we cut down on chocolate imports, for instance? Because we have entrepreneurs who are currently producing these products. They meet the same quality. They have the same packaging. Their products are even better than what we import, yet the importers still have a very strong hold on our market. Of course, this conversation has been sponsored by Apsa Bank. You can visit www.apsa.com.gh to take a look at all they have to offer, and especially their digital channels for all you techies, and it's supported by IT Consortium. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
And this is how it connects us.
私たちをつなぐ。
At Apsa, we believe in helping people find a way to get things done. We call this Africanacity.
It's a good day to meet every challenge. It's a good day to want more out of life. It's a good day to wish for it, work for it, go get it. Familiar taste, a delicious indulgent with a flavor you just can't hide. Refreshing energy gives so much for so little. For a strong performance, you've come to the right place. Good Day Energy Drink. Why wait a minute to enjoy a good day when every second counts? Good Day Energy Drink keeps you going.
Excessive drinking can be detrimental to your health. Not recommended for persons under 18 years, lactating mothers, pregnant women, and people sensitive to caffeine. This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the FDA.
Welcome back. It's the Citi Business Festival. This week we are looking at agribusiness, and today we're looking at how we feed ourselves through a sound import substitution strategy. We import billions of dollars of food into the country that we have the potential to actually produce locally and help our local businesses grow so they can employ more people. If you have any questions or contributions to the conversation, we want to hear from you. So please use the hashtag Citi Business Festival. Our WhatsApp line is 0550-585832. If you're outside Ghana, you can use the country code +233. If you're on Twitter, you can tweet at me at GFACCTV and I'll ask all of your questions. We have some of our guests on Zoom. If you have any questions, just click on the hand raising icon and then I'll call you to ask your questions so that our panel can answer all of those questions. And as we wait for you, I've received some of the messages from our viewers. So, hi Jifa, I have a 100 by 80 foot plot located in a farming area in the eastern region. I want to use it for a processing or preservation agribusiness. I don't have funds nor the expertise. What opportunities are there for me? This is Nana from Kwabenya. I think, Ben, would you like to answer that question?
To me, Jifa. Right. Yeah, I think what I can do, I would say now, is Nana should reach out to Cosmos Innovation Center on our social media platform, any of them, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and send a note or send an email through our website. We can help him with that. I think it's a very laudable thing that he wants to do, and what we do best is to nurture ideas and help you to take it to market. So please reach out to us, and for anybody like Nana who has something, who has ideas, wants to take to market, reach out to us. Maybe, Jifa, if you would allow me to talk about our upcoming program, which is looking at entrepreneurs who already have ideas and want to take it to market. Go to our website. We are currently enrolling new applicants, so please make sure you apply, and then we'll take you through the process and help you to achieve your goals.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ben. I have another message here. Good morning, Jifa. I thank you for holding this program about agribusiness. I'm into pig production in the Volta region, South Dai district to be specific. Getting just a permit and some legal documents from the district was a problem, making a delay in getting funds to improve my production. I have 50 plus pigs. Due to inaccessibility of market, I need to move to a land I bought close to the road. If I approach a bank for a loan, they need legal documents. My question is, for our district and municipalities are not willing to give us these legal documents or show us the way forward, how are we going to contribute towards rearing for food and jobs to eradicate the importation of these animals? Or meat products. I don't know which of you would want to, because on the one hand, we're saying we're in for food and jobs. On the other hand, entrepreneurs on the ground are also struggling to even get the documentations to present to the banks to be able to really scale their operation.
Well, it depends on what kind of documentation he's referring to. Mm-hmm. Obviously, he's in a business, he's trying to upscale.
Yeah, it's really my question.
My advice to him is that put your documentations together and go speak to a bank and let the bank determine what kind of documentations they require of you.
Okay.
Maybe, for example, of course, obviously you need to have a permit from this assembly that allows you to operate an agribusiness within the district. But those are not the critical ones. But I think that sometimes we are afraid to approach the bank because we have a mindset that the bank's not willing to fund. No, I think that's a very wrong mindset. Approach and let them tell you exactly what it is. It could be a bit frustrating sometimes, but it's important that you do that.
Speaking of approaching the bank, there's a question for you here from Zotto from Pharmacist. I think Pharmacist is one of the Cosmos businesses. I think the biggest contributor to huge importation is the limited capacity of farmers, which is mostly as a result of high risk of investing in farmers. What is the position of Apsa Bank Ghana in supporting startups that are focused on developing monitoring mechanisms to reduce the risk of investment losses?
Well, so I just wanted to add a bit to...
You answer this question.
And then I deal with that one. So when you have a business, come and share your ideas also with the financial institution, because at a point you need the service. What we have at Apsa is our unsecured facility, and that one is for agribusinesses businesses that are not able to produce all these documentation. So come up, work with us for some time. Let us monitor how you are making progress. You work, you pass your money through the financial institutions. We are monitoring and seeing that this business on its own is able to generate enough cash flows and all that, and the bank can on the back of that lend you something. Once we've checked your location and everything and we are satisfied, we can go on to do that. In terms of startups, we have our startup proposition that seeks to support startups, and it's mainly to help them to grow at that point where you are starting up, there's a lot to be learned. So do you have your strategy? Do you have your plan well thought through? And so at that point, it's not about money giving you financing or just pushing financing to you, but it's also for you to begin to learn the ropes, to learn how to keep your books, how to go through the process, how to understand even the industry in which you are. And so you come to us and we will take you through it up to a point where we realize that you are capable of taking a financial support or facility. Then we go ahead and do that. In terms of providing data and collecting data, like James, no, not James, Ben said, they are also into the tech bit, so they can help you structure what you are doing. You talk to them, they would help you, and as you go along. In fact, we are working with some of the fintechs or agri-techs that they are developing and gradually growing them to the point where we are able to give them facilities.
Okay, thank you very much. And we want to still hear from you. So please, if you're on Zoom, just click on that icon that looks like you're raising your hand, and then we'll have you ask the questions directly. If you're not on Zoom, we want to hear from you. So please use the hashtag Citi Business Festival for us to hear from you. And our WhatsApp line is 0550-585832. So Catherine, I asked you earlier, if I go into a supermarket right now and I want to buy chicken, chances are I'll get packaged imported chicken is higher than getting access to a local chicken. If I walk into a restaurant and I want to buy jollof and chicken, chances are that jollof is not made with local rice. Meanwhile, we have local rice. That chicken is not produced locally. How do we get to a point where we have more representations of local products, both in our supermarkets and in our restaurants, than we have currently?
I think we have to continue the fight with the mindset of that when it's imported, it's better than when it's local. That, I think, Citi, you did very well with that fight, and I think we must continue that fight. Made in Ghana goods. Let us focus on made in Ghana goods. Let us understand that when we focus on made in Ghana goods, that is how we're going to fix our economy, because all their producers, if they are able to sell their products, that helps the economy. We really need to drive that. We have quality products, but it's just the mindset that we need to work on. And then I want to touch a bit on the processing. We need to look at how to make processing easier, because it's difficult. Let me give you an illustration. You have two youth. They want to go into fruit juice. Okay, now machinery, we don't have the machinery. It means you have to import machinery. Production, the raw material. You find that someone who wants to set up fruit juice processing has to go to different farms to collect different fruits, and different fruits from different farms, different quality. Okay, it takes so long to gather. If he needs 2 tons of fruit, it may take him maybe 2 weeks to get that 2 tons of fruit. So whilst he's collecting the fruits, he needs power, refrigeration, to keep cooling those fruits. Okay? Then he needs all sorts of certification. He needs a building. I mean, all the trouble that he has to go through. Financing, when you go to the bank and you tell them you want to set up processing, it's a bit difficult. And then you get the second youth who is importing fruit juice. Okay? He brings it in, he pays customs, gets it out. It's sold, because we have the mindset, if it's imported, it's good. If it goes to the bank, oh, okay, this is export and import. You sell, I get my money back. Okay, here's the money. That is the illustration. Getting into processing is difficult. How do we make it? What is the incentive for one youth to decide to go into processing versus importing?
So, Mr. Kwesi, over to you.
Yeah,
what is the incentive to get young people to get into the processing space? Because as it stands now, our market is we've flooded our markets with just people who just buy and sell, because it's less risk, and in the end, everybody's just trying to make a profit.
No, I totally agree with you. And that's what I'm saying. That, and Catherine mentioned, reinforce the point I made. Unless we address our production-related issues, going to be extremely difficult. You talk about fruit juice. I mean, let me be a bit technical here. We have what we call bricks that you measure the acid sugar ratio. Now, if I want to buy from him and her fertilization program is different, I get different bricks levels. It makes it even more expensive for you to put around. Most juices you drink in this country are fresh, naturally squeezed juice. Most juices we import, these are formulation and not based on the fresh juice. But, you know, Jeffa, most Ghanaians will probably reach out for the one imported. We talk about rice. Anytime you eat wache or you go into a mutu on a Sunday, you actually locally produce rice. You know, so I think that Catherine is right. We've got to have a certain mentality check on ourselves. Are you aware, for example, that last 2 Christmas when CTFM were promoting your made in Ghana rice business, there were cases where people will buy locally produced rice and put it in sacks of imported rice and you will buy it at that price because you assume it's imported. So for me, I come back to my same point. How do we address the production challenges? Because your processing is predicated on the quality and specification of what you are producing. And unless we address it, whether through financing, whether through irrigation, whether through regulations, unless we address those key issues, these problems will be there. And you see, the problem with the banks is that if you go to a bank, you've got to have a certain proposition that the bank has to weigh the risk of it. Mm-hmm. So you, the entrepreneur yourself, also have to do your own risk assessments to be clear that where are the issues where there are possible risks and how do I mitigate them. And I always encourage people when they come to our offices that try on your own, identify where the risks are, you know. But, you know, I'm pleased with Ben here because we've had a lot of discussions and we've looked at ways to help the youth. And I know that some banks have come up. Apsa, I know 1 or 2 banks. I don't want to mention names, else you send me a bill.
The only bank to go to is Apsa.
So I don't know. But they've all come up with these ways. And there's one, we're working with another bank where they're developing a financing for agribusiness, young guys engaged in agriculture, where they don't even have to provide any collateral. Mm-hmm. You know, and I'm sure you come in, like what William was also in Apsa. So there are a lot of opportunities out there. Maybe what we haven't done well is to shout out, to say these opportunities abound. We're willing to help these young guys invest. And I think that it's a challenge that we need to also find a way to amplify that. Okay. That there are finance mechanisms for young farmers and young agribusiness. I don't like using the word farmers. Because, you know, the young
value chain is
you call
huge.
You call him an agribusiness player. Mm-hmm. It sounds more.
Well, there's agri-tech. There's so many things.
You know, I don't use the same word, but I won't use it. But it sounds more. Okay.
It's okay. We have some contributions from our Zoom guests. If you have any contributions or questions, the hashtag again is Citi Business Festival. This is coming from Kobina Essa. He says, as a nation, if we have to promote locally made products and reduce imported products, it starts from leadership. Getting our locally made products on shelves of our supermarkets and groceries is one of the most difficult parts of the business, since these supermarkets do not have any minimum limits with regards to how much made in Ghana products they can put on our store shelves. Really great contributions there. James, I want to come to you on this because you have a lot of experience in the fast-moving consumable goods space, and you've also tried your hands at processing. Realistically, what would we need to do to get to a point where there's more local representations on our store shelves? When you walk into a local restaurant, you know that whatever meal you're buying will be from a local producer. We know countries in this world where people are actually promoting from farm to your dining table. Consumers don't mind paying a little bit of extra money to know that they are buying from local farmers. We're obviously not there yet because we are still in a developing market where people make decisions based on price points. But what are the things that we can do to begin to bring down some of these things that we import into the country?
Okay, so I think first of all, we need to remind ourselves that it's a free market situation we operate in. There's an extent to which regulators can do some enforcement. I've had some very personal experiences where even when I worked for some of these international companies, it wasn't so easy to list some locally produced brands which were part of the overall brand portfolio of the international companies. The fact that it was just produced locally created some bottlenecks. But we persisted. And I think it's basically also about persistence. I know that we've been talking about mindsets. Sometimes we assume that if you walked into ShopRite and you have a locally produced product, ShopRite, because it's South African based, and the perception is that they bring majority of their stuff from South Africa, we cannot list. We indeed can list. I've been able to sell mangoes into ShopRite this year directly from the farm. Not a big quantity, but I wanted to test it, and it wasn't so difficult. So I think it's all about just bearing in mind the fact that in spite of the fact that you want to make the effort, you cannot compel the shop owner, because they also want to play it safe and look at their fast lines. Now, if you're going to list anything in their shop, they want to make sure that it meets their consumer demand. But first of all, the mindset should be positive. Approach them. However, you don't approach them with a long story. I think at the end of the day, quality speaks for itself. And normally, if you are able to do your sales talk, and if you are able to give them the right information, and if you are able to package, I'm not talking about packaging in the sense of big processing, but sometimes the way you even present whatever you want to sell will give you a good sell or a bad sell. So yes, sometimes you go to these shops and you look at the representation and it's pathetic, but quality sells. But even if you have the best quality and you lack the requisite confidence to be able to walk into these shops and to speak boldly and confidently about what you're doing, you will not make it. Let me just mention that most of these big multinationals are not just interested in what they buy and stock. Sometimes you also have a mind on a social contract, and they would love to work with some small farmers who are doing the right things. They will focus on quality, but they would love to also realize that they're paying or doing something back into the small community that as a farmer or as a small processor you are working in. So in summary, I think, first of all, just make sure that you have the right quality, and then have the right mindset, and then have the right confidence to be able to go in. You don't go in with limited. You should be able. I mean, most of these supermarkets would engage you. They will interrogate you to even understand whether you understand the market you want to operate in. So go with the right knowledge, have the right confidence, and go with a quality product. And the chances are that you will succeed.
Thank you very much, James. There's a comment here and a question from Zoom. Again, our Zoom guests, you can just click on that icon that looks like you're raising your hand, and then you'll be able to ask your questions directly to the panel. George J. Addo says, good morning, Jifa. Thank you for all the information that you guys are giving us. I started a rabbit farm just within 4 months, and I have 25 rabbits now. I have a land and want to expand into full-scale commercial farming. I did my costing, and I need close to 20,000 Ghana cedis to support me raise 15 battery cage X times. I guess that's 5, including housing for the cages. I have some funds, but I need support to make it a reality. Are you able to advise any government funding available for me? So this will fall under Rearing for Food and Jobs. I don't know if any of our guests has an idea of funding that may be available for entrepreneurs like this.
Well, it depends on the nature of funding that he requires. From what he's saying, he's talking about funding for battery cages to rear them. I think it would be best if he went to the Ministry of Food and Agriculture to find out the nature of interventions under that. And also I know that there are a number of NGOs.
KIC is there as well.
KIC where they're supporting with software grants or some a blend of both to support farmers like him.
Okay. Thank you very much, and Apsa.
So like I mentioned earlier, we would love to work with such and to grow them. Sometimes you feel that you need the cash now because of where you are at, but
will be technical.
It could be that there's technical support for you to even look at markets, be able to sell more of what you have now, be able to grow your business gradually onto a point where you can take such facilities. But also in terms of looking at funds that are of lower interest rates or of interest rates that agribusinesses can work in. It's important that the country, as a country, we think through it and see if we can come up with funds that are able to be assessed by financial institutions and to be able to support some of these agribusinesses. I mentioned earlier that it's very difficult for most agribusinesses to thrive under interest rates, like the commercial interest rates that we have on the market. And so there should be a way. I know that there's some fund available, but is it enough? Government should be able to work with the Ministry of Finance and various partners to see if we can get financing at a very affordable interest rate, so that the processors and then the young ones will be able to access such funds. I think that's one.
Thank you, William. Governor's hand is up on Zoom. Governor, go ahead.
Yes, please. So I asked the question initially about the processor, and with regards to the reply, I'm very satisfied with that. I think personally, with regards to being confident and being bold and going in to sell is key. I have worked with multinationals and I've sold products. So I've worked with Guinness Ghana before. I've sold products to places like ShopRite and Game. I've worked with Vodafone. I've worked with banks like Ghana Commercial Bank and UT Bank. So I've sold these kind of products into some of these retail stores before. But however, when you go in as a young entrepreneur, so for me, I'm into meat processing. So we process raw meats that we source locally into sausages and burger patties. And going into the big stores like Game and ShopRite, the discussion is always different. No matter the kind of sales acumen that you have, coming from a small company, usually a locally oriented company, the conversation is different, because when I'm going into a retail outlet like ShopRite and I'm going on the back of Guinness Ghana breweries, or I'm going on the back of Fan Milk or whatever it is, already the sales discussion is different. But when you're going as a young entrepreneur or a young person who just started a business, it's quite difficult all the time to try and get your product in. So I think that is one of the main issues that a young entrepreneur has. For example, we have all the processing, all the products done, but getting your products on the shelf. And the mindset is right. I mean, getting people to actually understand that we need to buy made in Ghana products is key. But we always need to get your products at a point of purchase, because at the end of the day, if somebody enters ShopRite and 60% of the products or the sausages on the shelf are made in Ghana products, definitely the possibility of them getting to understand that our products are good will be high, because they would end up purchasing our product. But if we can't get our products onto the shelf, that alone is a milestone, and that alone is a hindrance. So I think there's so much that one can do as an entrepreneur in terms of the selling and going out to do all that. And it's quite difficult. And a lot of salespeople, strong salespeople who I have worked with in the field, can come out to tell you that it's very difficult coming from the angle of a young entrepreneur than coming from an angle of a multinational, or coming from an angle of someone who has exceeded or has an acres or farms or on that level. The discussion is always different. So our appeal is, from a leadership point of view, can there be some kind of caveat? And of course, we understand that it's a free trade, but it's not acceptable to go into a place like ShopRite and you have all their burger patties and sausages, 90% of them are imported. 90%. And I work, because I'm in that industry, I went to do my research. In fact, when it comes to the burger patties, 100% of them were imported. None of them were locally made. But we do have locally made products. So there should be, and I'm not saying it should be 100% made in Ghana product, but there should be some kind of caveat that would allow them, the retail, the international groceries, to actually come out and solicit and look for some of these products that, okay, we need some made in Ghana, locally made eggs and all these burgers or sausages or whatever, that we need to also stock on ourselves. That will also help push some of us to that level, because no matter how strong you are with sales acumen, if you are going on the back of a startup company as a young entrepreneur, it's very difficult.
Thank you very much, Kobina. So I have two parts in this, and I think James may want to answer some, but for Catherine, how do we create cooperatives within the different sectors of the different sectors that he's coming from meat production? Somebody else could be making pineapples. So if a ShopRite is looking and has maybe I need 100,000 of this a year, you can consistently provide that because you are one of the brands that has been able to successfully dominate that space. When I walk into some of our supermarkets, when I'm thinking fruits and vegetables, all I see is Eden Tree. How do our local entrepreneurs get to a point where you are? Then my next question has to go to Kwesi. What support do we provide these entrepreneurs to ensure that, one, their products are competitive, two, these supermarkets are given some sort of standard that at least 40% of your goods, if you can source it locally, do so? And is there a way we can even subsidize their products so that if we're talking about volumes, another country can just dump products in volumes and just make 10-20% less profit, and our guys may suffer? What's the real world solutions that we're giving to them so that their businesses can thrive? A lot of young people are leaving corporate world. They're going into agribusinesses, and these are the challenges they are facing. Right.
I'll speak for myself, and that is you have to be consistent. Okay, and sometimes the supermarkets they sign a supplier on. Okay, sometimes our attitude, they need the supply today, but maybe I'm going to a funeral so I can't produce. Okay, or I have this or I have that. Once that happens, then they lose their trust. Okay, you have to be consistent. We have been at Eden Tree, we have been 6 days, every day of the week except Sundays, we're supplying the shops. So when that happens, they trust your brand and they can rely on you. It's reliability. Once they can rely on you, then you're okay. So I think we need to work on reliability as well. And yes, I don't know if there can be some assistance from government on cooperatives or bodies that can assist the youth, because they are trying to get them into business. Maybe be the middle people between them and the retailers, so that at least they give the youth a chance, the startups a chance, because it's very difficult when you're starting up. But then my advice to startups is, one thing that you must focus on is reliability. You have to be reliable and you have to be consistent.
Okay. This is still the Citi Business Festival. Kwesi, I'll come to you next. We're going to go for a quick break. We want to hear from you. We are talking about agribusiness all week long, and today we're looking at feeding ourselves through a sound import substitution strategy. A lot of people are producing things locally that we can substitute for what we import into the country. Yet each year we bring in billions of dollars of products that we have the capacity to import locally. So today's conversation, hopefully by the time we are done, you're able to find opportunities within the space that you can take up and help us really bring those numbers down as far as our agri value chain is concerned. The WhatsApp line is 0550-585832. Of course, this has been sponsored by Apsa Bank. Visit www.apsa.com.gh to take a look at all their digital channels, and sponsored by GIPC and IT Consortium. We'll go for a quick break and then continue.
And this is how it connects us.
私たちをつなぐ
Apsa, we believe in helping people find a way to get things done. We call this Africanacity.
Good Day Energy Drink keeps you going. Available in major supermarkets and shops near you. Excessive drinking can be detrimental to your health. Not recommended for persons under 18 years, lactating mothers, pregnant women, and people sensitive to caffeine. This advert is FDA approved.
Welcome back. It's still the Citi Business Festival. This week we are looking at agribusiness. If there's anything we learned from the COVID period is that if the world turns its back on us and if we close our borders, we'll be able to take care of ourselves if we really are intentional about what we're doing in the agri space. And the value chain is huge. There's so many things you can do, from just planting on the ground to processing, to distributing, to packaging, to ensuring that products on the store shelves get picked up by consumers. So we'll be looking at opportunities for the entrepreneurs who are also on the line looking for things to do within that value chain. If you want us to hear from you, just use the hashtag Citi Business Festival. Our WhatsApp line is 0550-585832. If you're outside Ghana, you can use the country code +233. If you're on Twitter, you can tweet at me at GFACityTV. Of course, this entire conversation has been possible because of Apsa. You want to go to Apsa Bank Ghana GH. Visit their website, www.apsabank.com.gh, to see all the services they have for you, especially those who are techies and want to move money virtually. They can help you do that with just a click of a button, and it's supported by GIPC and IT Consortium. I have some questions here that I'll read. If you're on Zoom, just click on the link, that's the icon that looks like this, and then I'll call on to you. This is coming from Nana Yao Sasu Apia Miracle. Jifa, I would like to commend you. Okay, thank you for what you're doing in the agriculture space. Also, I would like to ask Kwesi from Gersal if they have any plans for startups in the coming months or years.
I know Nana Yao Miracle. Well, I mean, Gersal, basically, we work through the financial institutions, okay, because we're issuing guarantees to them to lend to the sector. Of course, we work with them as collaborators. We do assessments together. So it depends on how it's packaged. Mm-hmm. You know, at the end of the day, I mean, look, you agree with me that one of the most critical elements in the whole finance scheme is the human being himself. Whether, like countries, whether the person is disciplined, the person's track record, and so forth. You know, so we don't shut our doors to anything per se. A lot depends on the bank's ability to lend, and then we will support the bank. Okay. And William has just mentioned that they've come out with a new product, mm-hmm, that allows them to lend to startups, mm-hmm, without the limitation of, I mean, they are not burdened by collateral and so forth. So I would encourage people to go to the banks, and we will support the banks. Okay, so throw my next question to James briefly. How should Ghana really deal with this food security issue, and what must we do differently to ensure that import substitution is a reality? Okay, but thanks, Jifa. Let me just make a quick comment, a few seconds on the gentleman talking about the startup and entering the big supermarkets. Just a thought came through my mind about advocacy, and I think that we should be able to go back to, say, the Private Enterprise Foundation, which is a body for the private sector, just to be able to try to do some lobbying and advocacy. For all you know, the ShopRites and the games and the marinas of this world have not just given it a thought, but if a body like that did some lobbying, it might help. Okay. Now, the question is, how do we achieve food security? Food security. Mm-hmm. Basically, I think that
I would have been tempted to say that we should just address the constraints that bedevil agriculture.
Okay.
Somehow, everything from the land tenure system, and if you're a farmer and you are confronted with land issues, then you know how limiting land can be. It's not just the fact that you can access land, but the fact that the security of the land you've accessed is a big issue. Everything we know about land, residential plots and all that, also pertains to agricultural lands. And I know government has been trying to do a few things, but I think that that issue must be looked at. Funding, we've discussed very extensively. Sometimes it doesn't take much to really get people on board. I'd like to just give a quick example of a few things that I've done over the last year or so. Because I came from the corporate world, I've been speaking directly to a few corporate friends and telling them how good it is. And I've been telling them in reality and with all honesty that some of the perceived risks which make us shiver when we get close to agribusiness may just be perception. And even with farming, in spite of all the perceived risk, I've been in farming. I was double-hatting farming with my corporate job. Yes, the risks are there, but sometimes it's just too heightened simply because of how agribusiness is approached and what type of agribusiness we go in and what level of preparation that it takes to go in there. So I've been talking to a few people, stakeholders in the agricultural space, agribusiness space, and telling them that at least there are a few successful farmers, producers, processors. Why can't we pull them together and so that they do some advocacy work? What we shout in the media will not make people pick up. I mean, generally, agriculture, and if I should say agribusiness, is not so attractive to the youth. Now we are seeing positive signs. I mean, I personally have been able to get 25 serious corporate people who would otherwise not think of going into agriculture, especially farming. I've been able to talk to them with facts. I've been able to showcase the little I'm doing, and people are coming on board. So it is one thing we need to do. Government can shout and everything, but if we don't show them the profits, we don't show them that it's with technology, farming can be less drudgery. If we don't show them the opportunities for even financing, funding. I've also been in another forum, like Kwesi said, where another banking institution spoke about some fantastic deals. We've heard about Apsa. These are real. It's because we also have a mindset that banks don't lend. They do lend into agriculture. There are other areas, climate change. It is things that we think is so distant. If we pay attention, over the last 3 or 4 to maybe 5, 6 months, maize output in this country, I don't have the statistics, but already we've been producing maize at just about 40% of what a farmer anywhere in the world can produce maize at. So productivity has been low, but it's even worsened because there have been unreliable rainfall and droughts, etc. Okay. What is government doing about this? I know we're talking about irrigation, but what are we doing on a large scale?
Thank you.
If you did small irrigation, So all the constraints that we have, I think should be dealt with. But particularly, I want to hammer on this advocacy thing so that the little success there we can showcase.
Thank you very much. Ben, I want to ask you as well, because I know that a lot of your guys have been solving these issues that we've discussed today, from Untitled Chapter to the guys who have the greenhouses to really just adding value at every stage of the supply chain. What more would we need to do to get to a point where we are confident enough to produce the things that we desire?
It's quite interesting that for you to be doing the job you do now, you must have studied something around communication, media works, etc. For someone, an engineer, they must have studied something around engineering, mechanical, electronics engineering, whatever. But when it normally comes to agriculture, and even back then, somebody would tell you, I'm going to work somewhere, and if I'm getting old, food, or then I'll retire and go into farming. The mindset is what is killing us or what has killed us, and we are where we are now. And therefore, everybody thinks that I can wake up tomorrow and say that I'm getting into agribusiness. I have said this in earlier submission. I'm going to repeat this. Skills training. It is very important. And it is very important that we are very much aligned and also get to understand that agriculture is a business. My question is, do we even have an agriculture industry in Ghana? I would say we don't, because we have not developed the other verticals, the other value chains within agriculture to make it a whole industry. So for us to be able to really be food secure, we need to first be able to produce more. Secondly, the quality of the production should be up. And before we can do that, we need to train our farmers. We need to train the people who are in the production. We need to also improve the technology. When I talk about the technology, it's not just about the mechanization. I'm talking about the seed. I'm talking about the input, other input that goes into it. I'm talking about the harvesting technologies. I'm talking about irrigation. James just talked about climate change. How are we using technology to even support farmers to be able to beat the climate change and yet be able to produce the quantity per hectare they're supposed to produce for us? We need to do that. And secondly, most importantly, post-harvest loss. Do we know how much we lose after the production? FAO in 2014-2015 is talking about $500 billion for Africa, post-harvest loss. Just imagine that. So we need to be deliberate. And I'm happy that Citi FM has taken this initiative and we're having this conversation. I think it starts from the conversation. Produce more, take care of post-harvest loss, add value to the production. Put the right infrastructure in place. James and others have spoken about the irrigation, the mechanization, etc. And put the youth at the center of this. When you're talking about technology, I did last mile training for well over 10 years directly on the farms with farmers. Talking about technology to a lot of them is, you're talking gibberish. But if you have a younger person who have had some level of education in agriculture, appreciating the likes of a tractor app, appreciating how to leverage on technology to improve their product, is easier. And then we can start talking about the seeds, the input, the rate of application, etc., etc. We talk about food security. Have we talked about food safety? Do we know the amount of chemical residue in some of the food that we eat? So for me, as we talk about food security, we talk about food safety. Let us look at all these few things that I've mentioned. I think with the others that the other panels would add to it, that will make us whole and be able to position us as a country to be food secure.
Thank you very much, Ben. I have some messages here. Alex Osei from Dunkwalfin says, I want to know how I can help myself now. I'm interested in farming and hope I can start it, but I don't have any help when it comes to money problems. There's also an issue of, this is a huge challenge with storage facility in this country. Due to that, once the season is out, we have to resort to importing the products, especially when it comes to perishable produce. What can we do to solve this problem? So this question has to do with, a lot of the food waste problems that we've talked about. When the thing is in season, we overproduce it. Do we have warehouses? Do we have facilities to store them? So we provide it to the market when it's no longer in season. Umar Abdullahi says, please, I have a rice processing plant located in the northern region in Bimbila, which is full in production of both parboil and straight milling rice. But the challenges we have is ready market and resources. So I want to know if Apsa can support. Hi, Jifa. My name is Isaac. Where in the value chain can transportation be placed, and how can one be profitable if I focus on this aspect? So we're looking at the value chain and the opportunities within it. Ben just talked about post-harvest losses. When you look at the way we transport some of our fruits and vegetables from one point to the other, you can clearly see why we have at least 40% of them going to waste. From your experience, Catherine, what are some of the opportunities in that space that young people can begin to take up so that we have more representation on the store shelves?
That's refrigeration. If we can control their produce with temperature, then it means that it has a longer shelf life. So youth can think of maybe investing in refrigeration transportation and offer services to farmers. Whether the farmers will pay for this service too is also another issue. But I think that's something that needs to come on board, because even for the food being safe, it's also important to use temperature to control the food. And then also cold warehouses, that's also expensive, but if it's possible to provide chillers, to store the produce in, so that can also extend the shelf life of the produce.
Thank you. Percy, wrapping it up for us, what policy changes would we need to make if our local businesses are competing with commercial farmers from elsewhere who can just move volumes in? Our entrepreneurs currently don't have any form of subsidies. Those who decide to manufacture locally have to deal with challenges with sourcing the raw materials, energy issues, yet every single day they continue to bring products out in the market. What would we need to do as far as policy is concerned to get us to
I leave the studio with a very gladdened heart.
Really?
Because one is that the enthusiasm, it's really overwhelmed me. The fact that you've got young people willing to engage in agriculture, I think it's something that, for me, it gladdens my heart. That's the first one. I did some study for FAO some years ago, and I was looking at a certain sector, a very successful sector. And it struck me that out of the top 10 players in it, none of them had any training in agriculture. They were professionals, lawyers, pharmacists, bank managers, and so forth. And James is a clear example of such a person who's transited from corporate into agribusiness. And what it tells me is that if people see opportunity to make money, they will get into it. Catherine didn't do agriculture at university, but she's a major force in the vegetable sector. Okay.
And fruits
so
as well.
what it tells me is that, and what Ben is doing is that let's create an environment for people to come up. Now, I think there are certain critical things we all converge on, is that, and James mentioned it to the large extent, and sometimes I've been saying that unless private sector comes together and engages and gets government to understand where they're coming from, we'll not be able to achieve where we want to get to. Because there are a myriad of problems: land issue, weak regulation, unfair trade practices, even our labor law at 468 or so, I think so. Is it well conducive for agricultural processing? I used to be in the export business some years ago, and we used to work on Sunday because there's a vessel at Tema Port. You have to go to work. Now, it says 40 hours, but we all assume that Saturday, Sunday, there's no work. Okay, so advocacy is important. Now, let's identify the critical issues in policy. I've mentioned irrigation. Okay, that's one. I've mentioned that climate is becoming a major issue. Irrigation can help address it. We've got seed laws. Are we using it? How well conversant are we? But unless the sector, and I know James is a member of the National Best Farmers Award, and I'm happy he's leading this revolution, and some of us also engage in agribusiness ourselves. Unless like minds come together, and I've seen it happen, okay, in the 80s and 90s, where I was part of an association where government even managed to allocate a place at Tema Port to facilitate exports of horticultural products. It came because people required, and you had great support from government in those days. Like mine, we need to come together and then engage policymakers. Say, look, we are in the sector. Mofa is not going to do the one. Mofa is not going to be the one planting maize or planting cassava or planting. It's people like us who are going to do it. Now, how do we make policymakers understand what the issues are for us? Of course, there's a responsibility on us too. To be clear, where does our line of duty end, and where does government also merge with us? Now, finance. We spoke about finance to a large extent. GESL, for example, it's a policy that is supposed to address and ensure that finance flows from the banks. It's a policy initiative. It came as a result of advocacy by some key people to address finance, and it's in place now. We're working closely with the banks. It's addressing that. But if you just address the finance components, and you don't tackle land regulation, You don't tackle issues of standards. You don't tackle production systems. You don't tackle irrigation. Then it's like a water pipe where you're passing water through and there are holes within the pipe. It won't flow out. So I think that there's a need to have a holistic approach. As for when we read some of these policies, whether MetaSep 1, 2, FASDEP 1, FASDEP 2, IFJ, it addresses these key thematic areas. I hear people say that, well, the policies are good, the implementation is poor. As a policy person, policies are good when the implementation can be effected. Implementation is an integral part of policy itself. So we don't need to, distinguish the two. It's part of it. And the key people who would drive that, or the key people who are supposed to drive the agricultural revolution, are the private sector, people like James and Co and Ben. So my suggestion is that let's come together. We're on our own in a little way, myself, William, Catherine, James, Ben. We will try and brighten our corners. But we need to come together to brighten a whole landscape. And if we don't do that, we'll come here next year, lament, cry, when the solution is facing us. Mm-hmm. And my last thing is this, you raise, I told you, for example, that anytime I go after church, Sunday, I go to Mamutu place, I'm consuming Ghanaian rice. Mm-hmm. We've got to be careful sometimes too that we don't, as you know, all Ghanaians walk to the max of the world. Mm-hmm. People go shop in other areas. And we also got to understand that there are those who are screaming for ban and so forth. Ghana is a signatory to WTO rules. There are certain critical issues that we need to adhere to. We also export. Okay. Now, how about if those of us who are exporting also, we also have a situation where UK, EU says, okay, you also don't bring it in. It's a problem. So it means that how we subsidize should be smart. Okay. In a way that we subsidize what is critical for the industry. And also the last thing is that, our trade. Sometimes there are a lot of bodies that are on fair trade practices, fair trade commission, that looks at anti-dumping issues. We don't take advantage of. And maybe CTFM, you're on a trajectory. May I suggest to you that I think you need to have a more broader forum. Call all the key, because agriculture cannot stand on its own. It has health implications. It has trade implications. It has finance implications. So there are other major agencies that play a role that revolve around the sector.
I have to wrap you up now.
So please, let's get all of them together. Okay. And let's see, and you be the lightning rod, and let's move agriculture to another level.
Thank you very much. William, briefly on the support banks, especially Apsa Bank Ghana, is providing us to really solve this issue.
All right, so thank you very much. At Apsa, we have been very intentional in supporting agribusinesses, and the facilities that we churned out this year shows that people are, appreciative of what you're doing. But we still want to do more with the support of various partners. Like I mentioned earlier, we look at the value chain financing. You don't want to finance a farmer here, a farmer there, or an input dealer here, or a processor here. You want to make sure that whoever you are financing is linked to the production end and also to the marketing end. And that is what we are bent on doing, just to make sure that financing flow through the value chain. Also, I mentioned earlier that there's a need for some advocacy so that we can get subsidized funds from the banking perspective, so that we'll be able to on-lend. So wherever government or various partners can come together to build up these funds for us to tap into. We also look at guarantees. GERSAL is there. I mentioned the MasterCard Foundation, who we are working with in providing some kind of support, technical support to the various actors we work with, Rural Development Fund. All these are necessary, but we want also for it to be made bigger so that the banks would be sure that their risks are covered.
Thank
and then in capacity
William.
building, we want to be that one to be taken on board too.
Thank you, William, for being with us. And of course, Mr. Kwesi, Catherine, Ben, and James. I know a lot of you wanted to hear from Catherine. She come on Breakfast Daily to share all her stories and experience and the nuggets with us. But thank you so much for being with us. It's been an absolute pleasure having you join us for this forum. And thank you at home. My name is Jifa Ekwia Ametam. It's been my absolute pleasure hosting this, and I hope you keep watching CCTV. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.